Good morning and welcome to the Monday Call, brought to you by NZ Funds. I'm Stefan Clark, Chief Client Officer. KiwiSaver is proving itself to be a powerful tool for New Zealanders to build their savings, yet it is also often misunderstood. As a retirement savings scheme, KiwiSaver enables individuals and employers to contribute to an account that is invested by professional fund managers, such as NZ Funds. But unlike regular investment accounts, there are particular KiwiSaver rules which investors should be aware of. This morning, we are joined by expert financial advisors, Andy Brown, Managing Advisor in our Auckland office, Fiona Smith, Managing Advisor in Christchurch, and Rebecca Miller, Wealth Advisor, also from our Christchurch office, who together will share their insights and experiences from working with and advising Kiwis across the country. We will discuss why saving is so important, the facts about KiwiSaver, and how you can make the most out of your KiwiSaver account. Thank you very much for joining us. It's really great to have you all here, and it's an exciting and important topic for us to discuss. Let's kick off with you, Andy, but before doing that, just for listeners to know, there are slides available on our website, which we'll be broadly talking to, but only in very general sense. So if you want to have a look at them, it's www.nzfunds.co.nz. Andy, tell us a little bit about the KiwiSaver market. Where has it come from and where is it going?
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Stefan. KiwiSaver started in 2007 and it's been very, very successful, a workplace savings scheme. 2023 today, it's got about 117 billion of funds under management. That's expected to grow very rapidly up to over 700 billion by the time we hit 2040. And part of the reason for that is it is underwritten by employers and employees contributing regularly and government contributions. So it's going to be very, very successful and very, very important part of the financial landscape in New Zealand.
And so on an individual basis, what does that mean? How do our accounts sort of look, given it's, that large number you were talking about isn't a collection of everyone's together? What does it mean individually?
Well, 2023, the average balance is around 34,000. That's expected to grow to about 145,000 by the time we hit 2040. But I guess when you compare that to some of our friends, like the Australians, their average balance for a 30-year-old is around about 150,000. So we're making good headway, but we're well behind.
Righto. And when you think about retirement and where it's going, tell us about what are the factors that and how many people are actually participating in it.
We kind of have to put our mind to it, I guess. It's something which we tend to put off, retirement. We've had some recent surveys done, and around about 3 million people in New Zealand think they will have to work past their retirement age to afford their retirement, and slightly less, 2.5 million Kiwis feel as they aren't on track to have enough money to have a happy retirement. And what we provide is we do a lot of financial literacy workshops, and we try to address that issue to help people that they will a bit more well prepared for their retirement. And just to put things into perspective, I guess the average 30-year-old, if they retire at 65 now, they've probably only got enough money to last them 9 years in retirement. So you need to think about it, and we still aren't saving enough.
And at the same time, I mean, it's not new to anyone, I imagine, but at the same time, life expectancy is growing. Can you talk to what we mean by that and where is it heading?
Well, if we think, the traditional age of retirement is 65, and if you're going to retire at 65, and we're all living longer, we know that for a fact through medical advances. So if you're going to live for another 25 years beyond your retirement at 25, that's a long, long time, and it's almost as long as being in your working life. if you retire, if you're 65 today, and you're expected on average to live, for males about 87 years old, and females a little bit longer, it's a long time, and to be in retirement and helping you fund your retirement. And I guess the other side of it is that with superannuation, people getting older, the affordability of super for the government becomes an ever increasing burden. So people need to take a bit more responsibility for themselves.
Righto. And so by the time we get to 2043, if life expectancy continues as we think it will, not only will you live to 89, but you'll also be living, as a female and 87, but longer. That's right, isn't it, Andy?
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Yeah. So I think from memory, it's 92 years for females, which is another 3 years of retirement savings that you need to take into account.
That's right. Yep.
So New Zealand has New Zealand Super, which is a universal entitlement. Can you talk to how much that covers and what that means?
Well, firstly, when you turn 65, we're all entitled to super, but I guess superannuation is quite modest for a single person. They'll get around about $30,000 a year, and that sort of decreases a little bit for a couple. But at the end of the day, superannuation is modest. It's worth about $300 to a couple, or a little bit more for a person who's a single person. But it's a small amount, and it's and overlaying that is that the form of super may not be around in its current form. The affordability of super to the government is becoming a burden. So we need to take responsibility to save for our own retirements, and we'll get our super, but we need to supplement that with something else.
Right, and it's not guaranteed for future generations that they will indeed get their super, although that is a hotly debated topic, and I understand that the Retirement Commissioner, for example, has been looking into it, including the age of entitlement. But if you're looking down the barrel 40 years from now, it's hard to know what that will look like, and what proportion of the average person's income needed during retirement will be supported by superannuation. So
I think that's a really good point, Stefan. I think some numbers we've had in the past in terms of research from our client base is NZ Super will cover less than half of what most average people will spend in retirement as a couple. So you do need to have something else in place for sure. Yeah,
and has that changed? I mean, in your time in the profession, how have people, have they changed their mindset thinking about it?
I think originally it was around about half of what people are spending. Now I think it's even less than that. So I'm definitely seeing a trend, and also people typically spend a lot more in the first 10 years of their retirement, may ease off after that, or may be directed into different types of spending. When people first retire, they tend to spend a bit more on travel and things, and then perhaps if they get older, it might be diverted to helping family or having health issues. So it doesn't necessarily drop, but certainly NZ Super is not sufficient on its own.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Andy, what do we do? I mean, and how do we compare? You mentioned some of our friends in other countries. What are the steps we need to be taking?
Well, here in New Zealand, if you're in KiwiSaver, the minimum you're saving is 6%, 3% from yourself normally if you're a wage earner, and 3% from your employer. But we are behind our peers out there. Australia, United States, and the UK are saving towards 10% for their employees. And they've been into their savings regimes for a lot longer than New Zealand. So, it's a great start, but we would suggest that we need to be saving more. And the magic number we come up with is, we'll save towards 9%, 9 to 10% will help ensure you're on the right sort of track. Obviously, that depends on the age you are and how long you got, and what your investing time horizon is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Rebecca, would you mind taking us through KiwiSaver at a glance and just sort of where you think, your take on the regime and what we should be making from it at this point?
Yeah, thanks, Stefan, and thanks, Andy. Some of these initial facts have been touched on in Andy's part of the presentation. So 2007 was when KiwiSaver started, and so it will be about 16 years old around about July this year. A lot of Kiwis are part of the KiwiSaver scheme. So about 60%, 3 million Kiwis are enrolled, with, like Andy said, the current balances of all the KiwiSavers being a very high number, between that 80 to 100 billion. That makes the average balance for a Kiwi around about $25,000. Our KiwiSaver, our average balance is a bit higher, 36,000, which is really typically due to the advice that we give to our KiwiSaver members. So all of our members have access to advice, and we do provide that education around contributing more than the minimum of the 3%. So it is just a good reminder for everyone to make sure that you are checking where your KiwiSaver is at, and that you're not still stuck in a default scheme that might be not appropriate for you at this stage, and get the balances up.
Fantastic. And the benefits of KiwiSaver, I mean, why have so many people taken to KiwiSaver? It is optional. You can opt out at least at one point. What is the reason someone would join?
Yeah, so there's some really huge benefits of KiwiSaver. The main ones are the extra contributions that come through. So your minimum as an employee is to contribute 3%, and your employer also has that responsibility to contribute a minimum of 3%. And then over and above that, you get a 50% return from the government for your first $1,042 that you contribute. They contribute 50 cents. So a lot of additional contributions flowing through to KiwiSaver, more than just your contributions, which make it hugely beneficial. It's also really tax efficient, the KiwiSaver scheme. The tax rate is lower than a normal investment tax rate, and the components of what is made up of schemes are tax efficient as well, for your shares and dividends, and overseas income is nice and efficient. Plus, another major benefit of KiwiSaver is you can use the balance to purchase a first home, which can help with getting that deposit together.
Yeah, and so younger people who are thinking, well, I don't really want to, start saving for my retirement. It seems so far away because I've got other goals, starting a family, building a house, or buying a house, whatever it happens to be. They can still access those funds, and that means it's, setting up the account isn't actually an inhibitor. That's right?
It keeps a lot of discipline around it as well, having those funds still available for a first time, but not touchable for other shorter term goals along the way. It keeps people on track for those goals.
Yeah, and we'll no doubt talk about this in a little bit, but the way you think about investing when you've got something in mind, such as a near-term purchase like a first home, can be different. So we'll talk about that a little later, but it's an important point to note that it's while you might be looking to buy a first home, how you think about where your funds are invested at that point, or at this point in time, you need to be mindful of that.
Stefan, just a comment on the zero tax. It's often very much misunderstood or not known fact that investing into portfolio investment entities, which KiwiSavers are, it's incredibly tax effective.
That's right.
And quite a powerful tool when compounding returns.
What do you mean by tax effective? Can you take us through what you mean by that?
Oh, well, tax effective means, for example, if you're investing in New Zealand and Australian shares through a PI, you don't pay any tax on the capital gains. and pretty much all dividends carry imputation credits, which are like a credit against your tax liability. So effectively, there's no tax on New Zealand shares and Australian shares. For international shares, there's a slightly different regime. You pay it's called the fair dividend rate, where you pay a 5% standard return. You pay tax, that's your income, you pay tax on that. So the tax rates are very, very low, and you can compare that to investing in something like a term deposit, where you're paying the full tax on the income that you earn.
Right. And so do pies themselves have a preferential tax rate?
Oh yeah, that's another great point, is that there are varying rates which you can of tax that you pay as an individual. The top tax rate being 28%. It's all driven by how much income you earn, but you won't pay any more tax than that. So if you're on a 39% tax rate, there's a massive advantage.
Yeah. And if you're at a 33% tax rate, anything above 28 becomes a tax benefit, which you, by investing through a pie, can ultimately contributes to your long-term returns. Most KiwiSaver schemes are pies, but not all of them. And so it's when you're thinking about your scheme, it's a good idea to keep in mind, well, how is my scheme structured? Great. Okay, Rebecca. So KiwiSaver's got some rules that apply to it. Can you take us through the high-level ones and what we need to, as investors, be mindful of?
Yeah, so the main rule is that all of the funds are locked in until you're 65, which is the current NZ Super eligibility age. So a point on that is if at the moment, if they do lift eligibility age for NZ Super, KiwiSaver legislatively goes with it as well. They can sever the two off, but that's how it is currently set. So unable to get to the funds until that age, unless you are drawing for a first home, have financial hardship, serious illness, you permanently leave New Zealand, or you die and it's dealt with as per your will. You can put in place a savings suspension once you've been a member of the scheme for a year, and that's allowed for up to between 3 months and 1 year. You can have that suspension, and you can roll it over if you are suffering hardship where you want to stop your savings for any reason. That can be put in place.
Righto, but in which case, do you continue receiving your employer and government contributions if you do that?
Those contributions stop as well, so it can dramatically impact that retirement balance.
Righto, okay. And so when we think about the contributions that are made, we at NZ Funds have tried to do a comparison about what that might look like for a KiwiSaver investor versus a do-it-yourself investor. You mind taking us through where our modelling got to and what's the big thrust of it?
Yeah, so the big outcome from it is KiwiSaver is extremely beneficial, mainly due to those additional contributions that you get through. So if you were a DIY investor saving 3% of a $75,000 salary, there's definitely some good compounding of savings throughout time. But when you add in your additional contributions from your employer and the government over a 30-year period, you've nearly got double the outcome in your savings pot. So there's a huge benefit for those extra savings. And when we do this modelling, we're always very generous to the DIY investor and give them higher returns and lower fees and those sorts of things. But even when those are taken into account, the benefits of KiwiSaver really shine through.
Right, but it does require a long-term outlook, right?
Definitely does, yes.
And then you see that the effect of compounding really it's significant. And so what does that mean for people who are looking to buy their first home?
Yeah, so again, if you were joining KiwiSaver at 20 and looking to buy a home at 30, so after 10 years, if you were saving just 3% of your salary yourself and earning really good returns, doing a great job investing, you're still not as well off as if you were making those contributions into a KiwiSaver because of those additional contributions from your employer and the government. So again, after the 10 years, you can end up with almost double the amount that you might have ended up with if you were doing it on your own. So that can be a huge difference in that first home deposit and type of property you can buy and when.
Yeah. And then also there's another group, which I'm sure many of the listeners on this call will be, is for the self-employed, so people who aren't salaried. What does that mean for them?
Yeah, there's even benefits for those people who are not working or are self-employed due to the government contribution of the dollar up to 1,042 of your contributions. So over a 10, 20, 40-year period, those contributions can really add up. There's only about $4,000 of your own money going into a KiwiSaver, 500 of the government's, but over 40 years with that compounding return, it can lead to about 350,000 of retirement savings. So there are some really good benefits even without the employee contribution of the 3% coming through as well.
The criteria around that is being 18 years old plus. So, even somebody who's a student or, we've got plenty of clients that are self-employed. We encourage them to put $90 a month in, and that gets them the full government contribution each year. So it's a 50% return on your money. It's a real no-brainer.
Or you might be just taking some time off work. Perhaps you're on maternity or parental leave of some kind. Other times when people might not be working, but there are benefits there. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think too, under NZ Funds, we send out a little bit of a reminder to everybody once a year, just to say you haven't quite put in enough to get the full government contribution. Do you want to add a little bit more to make sure you do? I think that's a really good benefit as well.
Yeah, because it does reset every year. So making sure that you're on top of it each year is important.
Great. And so you mentioned compounding. Take us through what you mean by that, and why is it such a powerful tool, and it obviously shines through over longer periods.
Yeah, it's an extremely powerful tool, and it's really having time on your side and having those returns add on to each other each year. So as an example, if you were to invest $5,000 each year for 40 years and sit in a growth strategy. So we use ours as an example here with our since inception returns of 7.14%. Even though you're only putting 5,000 of your own money away after 40 years, if it was not having any returns, that would add up to 200,000. But with the power of compounding returns in the background, it ends up being over $1 million. So there's always going to be ups and downs along the way, but with the average return over that time, it's over 5 times what you have actually physically saved as an outcome and returns, and that's before any government contribution is added to it or employee matching of the 3% is added as well. So if you've got that long-term time horizon, the compounding is huge.
And it would be obviously more sizable if you did have those contributions from the government and the employer. So
yes, much more.
Yeah. When you look at the start, it's sort of hard to imagine, that's looking that far forward as an individual, but the numbers, speak volumes. So
and that's even before we talk about the value of financial advice, which I think is coming up next, and making sure that you are in the right type of fund for your age and stage. So there's been a few studies showing around the value of financial advice. One of them that we look at is it shows that a 3% annual return could be added just by receiving that advice, making sure that you're in the right type of allocations and you're regularly reviewing it and just ensuring that your savings rates are in line with your goals. So a 3% each year doesn't sound like much, but again, with the compounding over an investment lifetime, it could be 250 times, 250% more, so 2.5 times more savings at that retirement.
Yeah, which is huge, right? I mean, 250% more from someone who, when you come to, it gives you a lot more financial security. Fantastic, Rebecca. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so Fiona, would you mind taking us through making the most of your KiwiSaver account and the choosing the right strategy and things to think about as you're reflecting on what you can do to maximize for you and your age and stage and goals and circumstances, how to use your KiwiSaver account.
Absolutely. So I think that flows on really nicely from the value of getting advice. As advisors, we're the ones that help out with asset allocation. So probably stepping back firstly from that is actually looking at your provider and what your provider offers and what their points of difference are. So using NZ Funds as an example, we offer both passive and active management in our KiwiSaver space. So we have different strategies depending on what one prefers. As an example, passive management, for those that aren't sure, is essentially replicating an index, and then active management where your managers will be more actively trading. The idea around that is to actually beat the index or beat the benchmarks. So we have different options in that space. So see what your provider offers. Do they have different life cycle options? Do they do responsible investing? There's all sorts of criteria you might want to look at from a provider perspective. And then probably what's more key is the actual asset allocation. So some questions to ask yourself in terms of whether you've got the right mix is what your time frame is. So how far away is retirement? And then probably, if you're younger, are you going to be using your KiwiSaver for a first home deposit? And then considering things like volatility, how comfortable you are with the value moving up and down. And then picking the strategy that actually reflects where you are. So for example, if you're a first home buyer, you want to be in a very conservative fund if you're going to be using the money in the next 1 or 2 years. What you don't want to happen is have your balance fall just when you're about to take it out for a first home. So that impacts what level of deposit you might have. So making sure your advisor will give you advice in that space, and then seeing what your other investment options are if you are in KiwiSaver for retirement. So whether you are in a conservative fund, a balanced fund, a growth fund, or whether you are in a life cycle type fund, which will be more age and stage appropriate. So as I said, NZ Funds do have a passive balanced fund, which is 50% income assets, 50% growth assets. Plus we have our actively managed options, which are income, inflation and growth. Predominantly, we have a life cycle option, which 90% of us and our clients use. And really, that's more appropriate probably for, I would say, 90% of people leading up to retirement, because they've got such a long time frame. And just to sort of, I guess, look at that in terms of numbers, if you are on a $75,000 a year inflation adjusted salary, if you're in an income strategy for 35 years, you could potentially have 360,000 by 65. If you're in a growth strategy, you could have 1.3 million at 65. So a really material difference there. But you need to be able to, I guess, stay on the roller coaster ride if you are in a growth strategy, because it will be more volatile. It will go up more, but also down more than being in an income conservative strategy. If you've got time on your side, then you should be able to sustain that, but just making sure that you are comfortable with that. And again, that's where the advice side of things kicks in.
And that's a huge difference in outcome after 35 years of just asking a simple question as to whether or not you're in the right scheme. It can have such a dramatic impact to the final numbers.
Yeah, it was interesting when COVID hit originally in 2020, when markets dropped away 25 to 30%, share markets I'm referring to here. A lot of people panicked, moved out of their growth KiwiSaver schemes into a conservative scheme. Unfortunately, they essentially made that move when they'd already taken the drop, and the recovery came really quickly, and they weren't in the growth scheme for that initial part of the recovery. So, having an advisor that can hold your hand through volatility as well and actually make sure that you can stay the course, that's quite key also.
Yeah, the challenge of looking through more choppy periods is I think is often difficult for investors. But when you wind back through time, you can really see how share markets do just keep over the long run, continue grinding higher and higher and higher and higher. And returns are episodic, people say in the industry, but you can see it borne out here, where over a 35-year period, what was it, 360,000 compared with 1.3 million. I mean, that is a huge wedge, a huge difference between the two. But it does require you to take to accept that there's a journey in the process, and that there will be moments along the way, but that's the risk and reward concept that people often talk to.
Risk and return go hand in hand. They're a trade-off, and the antidote for volatility is time. So if you've got the time, then you can afford to actually ride through that volatility.
Fantastic. So you mentioned life cycle. Take us through what that is and how we think about it, and then what do others do?
Yeah. So in our KiwiSaver scheme, as I said, 90% plus of our clients and ourselves are in the life cycle option. What that means is that you are invested across the income, inflation, and growth strategies according to your age. And the theory behind that is that the younger you are, the more growth oriented you can be, because the longer your time frame is until you can actually, one, access KiwiSaver, and two, use it right throughout retirement. So it's unique in the marketplace in a couple of ways. It automatically rebalances every year. So up until age 55, you will have 85% growth, 10% inflation, and 5% income. And each year, it will rebalance back to those numbers until you're 55. And then from 55 onwards, it will annually rebalance and actually start reducing the growth allocation. Now, it differs to others in the market. One of the main differences in other life stages type options is that it doesn't have you cashed up by 65. Because unless you're planning on having a really big 65th birthday bash and using your entire KiwiSaver fund for that, then you need to make sure you're invested for another 20, 30 plus years, because your KiwiSaver is going to last you that long. And so you need to have a growth allocation right the way through. So that's a really unique point of difference as well. It's not cashed up at retirement. You still have a reasonable growth and inflation allocation.
Right, so through retirement, not to retirement.
Exactly that. And the automatic rebalancing each year too means you're buying low and selling high, because you're reallocating between the different strategies. So that's another unique point of difference for us.
And that rebalancing occurs pre-55 too, doesn't it?
Correct, every year pre-55 as well, back to that 5-10-85 I talked about. Yeah.
Fantastic, okay. So the other thing is, research talks about that Kiwis need to save more. Can you take us through what that, what is the optimal saving rate and how we think about that?
Absolutely. Well, I think, Andy, you touched on it earlier in terms of what New Zealanders are doing compared to our counterparts in Australia, the US and the UK. So we're doing 6% as a minimum now, 3% employee, 3% employer, bearing in mind that the employer contribution is also taxed. And that's well behind the 8 ball, Australia doing 10%. Research shows that, as Andy said earlier, we need to be doing 9 to 10% of our gross income in terms of what we should be saving. And the the longer you leave it, the higher that percentage becomes. So the earlier you can start, again, referring to the impact of compounding returns, that 9% figure will be more relevant, but the longer you leave it, the higher that will need to be. Yeah, so as I said, we are lagging. Yes, KiwiSaver is absolutely great. We've now been in it almost 16 years, but we are behind our counterparts. So we do need to do a little bit more. And some of the options that we have for doing that, you could do your 3% employee contribution. You could up that to 6%, which then gives you a 9% contribution each year, which would be a long way to actually meeting potentially your wealth target or what you might need to do for a successful retirement. You can do that through increasing your employee contribution. Through payroll, you have the option of 3%, 4%, 6%, 8%, or 10%, but you also can do it voluntarily. And that's, I guess, another option when it comes to what we look at is, do we want to actually lock that extra 3% away? Do we want to do it into another investment vehicle that has a little bit more flexibility? So still sticking with the 9% theme, but doing your 3% into KiwiSaver along with your 3% employer, but that extra 3% actually putting it in another investment. We have what we call a wealth builder fund, and it replicates our KiwiSaver pretty much exactly. It has the same life cycle approach, but what it doesn't have is the regulated controls around accessibility. So by saving your extra 3% into a wealth builder product, you'll actually have options for accessing it prior to 65. So I don't know, take me for an example. My husband's a few years older. If he retires and I'm under 65, I won't be able to access my KiwiSaver. And if I want to retire too, I need to have availability of funds. So I save my minimums into KiwiSaver and put my extra into a wealth builder product so that I can have that flexibility.
Yeah, we also know life changes along the way as well, and so leading up to that retirement age, if something does change that you do need access to funds, KiwiSaver can be a big process to get access to, so that wealth builder just gives the flexibility around that as well.
So as I said before, you can do it through payroll with your KiwiSaver, but with Wealth Builder, you just set up an online payment. It's all controlled through online access, all your transactions, so you can control it totally at your end. The idea is still that it's a long-term investment because it is for retirement, but as Rebecca said, if something happens along the way, at least you've got accessibility to some funds.
And the other thing that, just linking it back to something you said earlier, if the age of eligibility changes, then those funds continue to be available, right? But it might be that it's not 65.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Okay. Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about the technology that's available nowadays. How do you think about that, and how does that help clients?
Yeah, so with our KiwiSaver, all of our KiwiSaver clients have access to an advisor. An advisor will contact them each year to make sure that they don't have any questions or concerns, to make sure that they are in the right strategy still, that it's still age and stage appropriate for them. And then when we look at KiwiSaver clients coming to us, new KiwiSaver clients, or perhaps ones that want to transfer from another scheme, we take them through what we call a savings advice tool. And that tool goes through some of the questions we talked about earlier in terms of what is your time frame for using your KiwiSaver? Are you likely to be using it for a first home? And also, how comfortable are you with volatility? So it goes through and asks you some really simple questions, and then it will help guide you into picking the right scheme for your situation.
Yeah.
So it's a really useful tool.
Yeah, it then prompts you into how much are you saving for retirement, and asking those questions around, is it enough? Could you afford to save a little bit more? And then is there a more suitable option than KiwiSaver for those additional savings?
Righto. And so when you're talking with a client, you'll take them through the concepts within there and I guess the calculator that enables them to think about that, and it'll inform how they then, I guess, look at their day-to-day spending habits and savings approach. Is that right?
It also offers some really good projections or future looking at as well in terms of what the future value might be by making changes to their contribution level,
Right.
and also different options in terms of choosing your funds. So if you're in an income fund versus a growth fund, some of those numbers we talked about before, $1 million difference over a 35-year time frame, that's really powerful to actually show what that looks like.
Fantastic. And it's not the only tool you use, though, is it? Take us through wealth planning.
From a private wealth perspective, we have a wealth plan technology tool. That's really great. It actually offers 3 different, options for us depending on our clients. So, for example, if a client comes to us, they've sold a business, they've got $1 million to invest. They don't actually have any requirements from it from a drawdown income perspective. We will do some risk profiling with them and create a portfolio based on that. And we can show them projections as to what that might look like. We can show them volatility up and down. We can show them, different asset classes and what the outcome might look like based on all of those. We have a savings-based tool as well, which is really excellent. What it does is it's for those people that are in their working stage of life. We help work out what their wealth target is if they want to retire at a particular age and how long they want their money to last for. And then we, probably more importantly, is once we've got that wealth target, it helps work out how they might meet it. And KiwiSaver is part of that, as is a wealth builder. But there's also lots of other components in terms of how much they might spend, mortgages, repayment of debt, savings, future sums, all those sorts of things.
Right.
And the last version of the tool is a spending-based tool, and that's for people that are near or in retirement, and they're in the drawdown phase. The wealth accumulation phase is generally done with, and we work out how long their money might last for. So again, it's a really good tool. Our clients love it because it's interactive. They can see the results basically on the screen. And we plan for all sorts of events too. The technology uses historical returns, and that includes the likes of the global financial crisis. So we know that there'll always be events. We just don't know when and what they look like, but there will always be something. So we plan for volatility along the way as well.
And I think one of the most important parts is that we don't just set it up once and leave them to it for the rest of their retirement or their savings time frame. It's an ongoing relationship that we're constantly updating for things that do change along the way.
Absolutely.
And so when you're modeling someone's future out, suppose you're a saver, I don't know, you're at age 55, you're thinking, oh, blimey, it's not that far away now, starting to perhaps get, turn your mind to, well, where am I at? What can I do? What do I need to do? I imagine along the process of unpacking all of this, there's some light bulb moments. How do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The wealth target can sometimes be a little bit daunting, but that light bulb moment is actually sort of almost working through the different ways that they can reach that wealth target and making it not as perhaps scary as it what initially might seem. Tougher, for those the longer you leave it, but as I say, the generations coming through that have been in KiwiSaver right since day dot will be certainly further ahead, but we'll be able to guide them as to, I guess, funding their retirement over and above what KiwiSaver might mean for them.
Yeah, I think one of my favourite light bulb moments was a younger couple who came in and they had purchased a first home and she hadn't had a chance to change her KiwiSaver out of a conservative income strategy. And so it was the most easy wealth generation I could do for them just by simply changing the tool to having her KiwiSaver and an income into our life cycle process. And it gave her an extra $1 million at retirement. So such an easy conversation and change to do for a huge difference in outcome.
And then also it takes into account, correct me if I'm wrong, but other assets like if you've got a house and what you might do with that when you come to retirement. It's not just financial assets, is it?
No, it's lifestyle assets as well. So, asking clients the questions in terms of, what it is they want to do with their current home. Do they plan on downsizing? Will they release equity from it? Do they have rental properties? How that fits into their retirement plan. Do they have a business that they're selling in the future? Potentially inheritances, although we, planning around inheritances is not necessarily the best thing, but, it might be somebody that certainly pretty assured that they're going to get something, so we can build all those into the picture as well.
Right, and it provides a pathway forward and sort of a broader insight.
Absolutely, yeah.
Fantastic. All right, well, thank you, Rebecca, Fiona, Andy. It's been a great session. KiwiSaver is obviously going from strength to strength, and it's going to be a big part of the, the financial infrastructure of New Zealand for the foreseeable future. And as individuals, I think we've talked about some important ways for us to make the most of the account that we, or the large majority of us all have. And then what ways to think about, well, what do I do to save in addition to that, knowing that the contribution rate 6 isn't enough. If we want to be having a fully funded retirement, we need to be higher than that, but it doesn't mean you have to put it into KiwiSaver. You can use other tools to do that. So thank you for your insights. It's been a great session, and have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been the Monday Call, brought to you by NZ Funds. New Zealand Funds Management Limited is the issuer of the NZ Funds KiwiSaver scheme, the NZ Funds Managed Superannuation Service, the NZ Funds Advised Portfolio Service, the NZ Funds Wealth Builder, and NZ Funds Income Generator. A product disclosure statement for each is available at nzfunds.co.nz. Past performance is not necessarily an indicator of future returns.